Welcome back to Rules of Engagement. Now let's get on to a segment submitted by Zerg player Killswitch about trying to understand why he lost the game and understanding the macro decisions you make early. So let's jump to his question. It's going to be, he said, a tough late game PvZ I had when I was in Silver League and my opponent was in Gold. It seemed my army would instantly die and I'm not 100% sure why. Are there any improvements I need that would help me out so I can move up to the higher leagues? So a couple of improvements, where we're going to look at this game, but a couple of improvements to keep in mind as we go through it are going to be, first is going to be to optimize your opening build. And then you're going to want to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the opening build that you just optimized. And last, we're going to talk about, we're going to get on to talking about playing to maximize the strengths of the build that you chose. So let's jump into the game here, and we're going to first talk about how to optimize the opening. So we're going to jump in at this replay at the really early on at the 3:30 mark. And one thing I already noticed, it's a fairly standard game, hatchery first, then spawning pool, but then double gas. And this is kind of strange because what are you going to do with these gases early in the game? I'm thinking maybe he's going for a crazy baiting bust, but even then he'd get one gas. I don't know. It doesn't actually make much sense. And then as I go through the replay, I realize one thing here. Okay, he's not actually using the gas. He just built 2 extractors, and he's not mining from them. Which actually is better than if he was mining from them because you can't do anything with the gas early anyway. But a very important thing to know about when you open your build is every building you place needs to have a purpose. If you aren't utilizing a building upon its completion, you shouldn't have built it. And this is true especially with Zerg because think about these gases. These gases were constructed at the 5:30 or at the 3:30 mark, but they weren't used until the 5:40 mark. If you can jump here, we can see the 5:40 mark right here. All of a sudden, he starts mining gas. So for over 2 minutes, these extractors were totally not used. They could have been 2 drones mining, and actually they could have been 4 drones, because 2 drones could have been mining. You could have built 2 more drones with the extra money, or perhaps gotten your second queen faster instead of just making a single queen. And that all is going to equal several hundred minerals. And all those minerals add up to a lot. So you're already falling significantly behind just from having an opening that's not optimized. And again, the same thing here with the spine cores. I talked yesterday about how you need to understand what you're... I talked on Tuesday about how it's very important to understand what you're scouting for. So you're scouting to Protoss, and you've seen that he's going to Forge Fast Expo. You should know that I'm scouting to Protoss. If I see Forge Expo, I do not have to worry about aggression until maybe the 7:30 mark. Maybe like the 6:50 mark if he's currently boosting out of stock or something like that. But basically, I don't have to worry about aggression early on in the game. So why are these buildings being built? This is another 150 resources per spine crawler that could all be extra drones, that could be other units, could be overlords, could be that 3rd hatchery, could all be things to make the build much faster and get out much more resources during the game. So you definitely want to optimize your opening. All your buildings need to have a reason for being there, and they need to have that. You need to build them so that they finish right when you need them. So that's a little bit about optimizing your opening build. Let's talk about how to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your opening. So as you go through this game, just go through it on times. We'll go through it on ×2 speed. And when you analyze your build, what you want to do is you want to look at your resource spending. Let's actually speed this up a bit. And there's a couple things to note really quick here. Is one, that you're taking extremely fast, and you're taking a very late third. The standard third is started at roughly the, around the 5-minute mark, let's say. Even earlier often sometimes, but for Silver League, let's say a standard third should be the 5-minute mark. There's a zealot already attacking this hatchery. The hatchery is just started at 8:30. That's extremely late third. And the other thing is that you're cutting drones very early. You only have 34 drones at 8:30 mark. So you cut a ton of drones very early in order to get out this double Evo chamber, the Hydra Descend, the fast layer, all these gases. So you have an extremely weak economy. And if you have a weak economy, it's important that you try to end the game immediately. Because every second that passes, you're going to be falling further and further behind your opponent. So if we remember back to that question, it was talking about how come I lost this late game? Well, it all comes from the beginning of the game. If you set yourself up where you have to win the game in a few minutes, you're obviously not going to win the game if it gets to a late game, and that's all because of these economic choices that were made. And if we look at this resource spending tab, we can see here almost much more resources spent on the army than the opponent, and then much less spent on the economy. And being a Zerg player, you should actually probably be spending more on economy than your opponent, significantly more. So when you're spending significantly less like this, and we look at the income, with 20 less workers, this means that you have to end the game immediately. That's the weakness of your build, is you have to end the game immediately. The strength of the build is that, well, let's look at army size. You've got a stronger army. Not by that much because your build was unoptimized from the opening, but that's the only strength you have, is you have a slightly stronger army. And this is something where you probably should already be attacking the opponent. If you look back, let's actually scroll back to about the 11:30 mark. We can see here, at this point in the game, once these Hydras pop here, at this point, if you look at this spending, look at the army size, this is where you're probably going to get the best advantage you're ever going to get. And if we look at the income, you're still going to be behind, so you've got to move out now. You've got all these units that you rush to get. You've got to use those units. So now let's talk about playing to maximize the strengths of your build. The strength is you have all these Hydralists. If you cut economy to get this army, then you need to use that army. So the 11:30 mark, you've got this army. It needs to be going out there and doing some damage. Whether it's through a drop play, a nidus, or just a frontal attack, it's got to go out there and do damage because this is a very, very all-in build, which is okay. It's okay to be all-in. But as we look at this game, the army's not moving out. Finally, a nidus network is being built. Then the army goes to the nidus network, and then finally an outlet's being built. But this army that was strong at the 11:30 mark hasn't gone to see action until the 14-minute mark. That's not playing to maximize the strength of the build, because the strength of the build was to get a good army at 11:30, and then you have to use that army. You cannot wait till the 14-minute mark to use it, because by then your opponent has had 2.5 minutes to catch up in army size. So that was a little bit of a mistake there. Now, before we get into this engagement, because this is an all-in engagement you need to win, let's talk about a few more things about optimizing this type of attack. One thing to look at is these double evolution chambers. Now, you've got 2/2 upgrades for the Hydralists, which sounds really good, but because your build is so all-in that you have to win the game right now, let's think about the resource investment into this missile attack. And we look at your total units. So you have 31 Hydralists. Now, you've spent 400 resources, actually on both these, so that's 6, the ground carapace and the level 2 attacks of each alone cost 1,000 resources. Add in the level 1 upgrades alone, you're talking about 1,500 resources. The Evo chambers, you're going to be talking up to about another, let's say, 1,800 resources total to get these upgrades. Those resources could have been another 12 Hydralists. Now, would you rather have 31 2/2 Hydralists, or would you rather have like 43 non-upgraded Hydralists? Well, if you throw it in the unit tester, I'll tell you 43 unupgraded Hydralists will beat 31 2/2 Hydralists every day of the week. And this is because it's just better. Like you have 30% more units instead of having the 2/2 upgrades. Makes your units about, maybe 15% more effective. So overall, you'd rather have the more units. Upgrades are good if you're planning on making it a longer game and continually making units throughout the game, because then you're not just helping the 31 Hydras, you're going to be helping hundreds and hundreds of units that are being built throughout the course of the game. But for an all-in attack where all you care about is the one battle, you'd probably rather maybe just get a single range attack upgrade, or maybe even get 2 range attack upgrades, but then neglect the armor, or maybe even just get 1-on-1, not invest so much in upgrades, which delays your push for so long. So that's another little optimization thing. Not nearly as big a deal as the opening, getting those gases and spine cores and cutting drones so early. But the idea is you've done this all-in attack, so now you need it to work. So you're trying to get the Hydras out of this Nidus canal. They're kind of walking around and attacking. This is actually okay. The micro here is totally fine, but here's where the issue is, right? Jamming these Hydras through this choke point. This is your one chance to win the game. You've got a slightly stronger army than your opponent, and Hydralists are pretty decent versus this composition. It's roughly cost even. Hydralists don't actually counter anything Protoss has, but at least versus this army, they're roughly cost even. So if you have the same cost value as they do, you should expect an even battle. If you have more like you do, you should expect to win. But if we look at how many Hydralists of yours can actually shoot in this engagement, then all of a sudden it starts looking not so great, because right here, you only have a few Hydralists that can battle here. And the rest of your Hydras are going to run around shooting buildings, which is okay. It's okay to shoot buildings, but you'd much rather shoot units. So the only thing you need to worry about here is not losing that Nidus network, because that Nidus is your route to get extra reinforcements. So ideally, your army, instead of being here, you should have some units here, and then you should have some units out here. And now all of a sudden, if your opponent wants to engage you, he's the one who has to go through this choke, or he has to go through this choke, and either way, you've got a superior concave that way, or a superior concave this way. Either way, you're making cones with your attack angles, which is exactly what you want to do. If your opponent stays back, then you get to shoot his buildings, but this time, you're killing his buildings while he's not shooting your units. So you're just getting free kills, and free kills is always good. Whereas let's get back into this game here, and you're realizing that you got to kill these buildings to let units get in the fight, and so you start focusing the forge down, and you know, it's good, you're killing the forge. But while you're killing that forge, you just lost 8 Hydras. That's like a 30-year army at this point, and it's not that good to lose a 30-year army during an all-in attack, because you really need that part. And now you're going to focus down the Twilight Council. And you're having to focus down all these buildings while he's attacking your units. So if you look at Units Lost tab, all of a sudden it's equal. Whereas you came out starting with a nice big advantage, if you take a look at right when this Nidus play hidden, because you killed all these Zealots and probes for free. So you're way ahead in resources lost. But then you equalize it by not retreating, instead having to kill his buildings while his units are attacking you. So you want to create that better concave situation instead of trying to charge through here and then realizing you've got to kill these buildings and changing your target priority in the middle of a battle. So that's another big issue there, is just the micro. You maybe would have won this game with this all-in attack, but unfortunately it didn't work out quite that well. And then once this all-in attack is held, because you lost all those extra units, now you're in a situation where, okay, you know, I've got slightly worse economy than my opponent, but my army is significantly worse. And talk about tech. He's on a billion warp gates, roughly billion, double Robo Colossi production, and all you have is Hydras. So his army is vastly superior to yours. His economy is superior, especially after he's up 1160 mineral income to 860 with 50% extra gas income as well. And this is a situation where you can't win anymore. I mean, maybe you got to do something clever. Maybe try to turtle the 2-base infested Broodlord Hive, get drop tech and drop harass with Hydra. That's why you take the top base and the bottom island. Do some really risky, greedy play. But this isn't a situation where you should look at the game 10 minutes down the road and say, I lost a late game. I don't know how to play late game ZVP, because your late game wasn't the problem. The problem here was that you lost the game because you didn't understand the strengths and weaknesses of your opening, and you didn't play to maximize the strength of your build. So let's talk about the quick recap there. If you want to jump up in leagues, you want to improve your play, the important things to do is 1, you got to optimize that opening. Then 2, you need to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your opening. And then 3, you have to play to maximize those strengths and weaknesses. So in this situation, you didn't really play to maximize them because you didn't commit enough to the all-in attack. You didn't attack quite soon enough. If you attacked about 2 minutes earlier, you would have been much more likely to win the game. I wouldn't worry about the late game. Worry about trying to perfect the early game and make your actions and the way you play out your build in line with maximizing the strengths and weaknesses of that specific build. Thank you guys for watching this segment. We're going to take a quick break to be right back with the Protoss replay.